Kia ora whānau. Good evening. Thanks for tuning into tonight's webinar. This is the second online event of our 2025 Sea Week Ngā Kōrero III Series. Each event of this year's series is focused around exploring one of the ocean literacy principles, with the goal of increasing ocean literacy right across Aotearoa New Zealand. Ocean literacy generally means understanding the ocean's influence on us, as well as our influence on the ocean. Tonight, we'll explore the seventh ocean literary principle, which is that the ocean is largely unexplored. Ko Alison Ballance tēnei, I'm your MC. I'm a natural history writer, a broadcaster. I love walking on the beach, I like diving, and I think the sea is amazing. With me, virtually, we have three fabulous guest speakers, as always, who will take us on a fascinating journey into some of the most remote and least understood parts of our ocean planet. I'll introduce them shortly, but first let's have a karakia to start. Whakamana te maunga, whakamana te wai, hei mauri o ngā tangata, ngā mea katoa he pai, haumi e, hui e, tai ki e. That translates as if we look after the water from the mountains to the sea, it will look after us. It is our life force. So kia ora again. If you've joined us before, welcome back, and you'll know how this all works. If you're new to this, a very big hello. We'd love for you all to introduce yourselves to us in the chat. We like to learn more about where you're tuning in from. I'm tuning in from Whakatū, the lovely Nelson at Te Tauihu, the top of the South Island. Now you'll find that chat box via the text bubble icon at the bottom of your screen, and that should bring up the chat panel on the right-hand side. We're also starting a poll now with a few quick questions. Please take part. It should be there right now. A bit of background about Sea Week, ko papa moana. It's New Zealand's annual national week celebrating the sea, te moana, and it's coordinated by the Sir Peter Blake Marine Education and Recreation Centre. Now, Sea Week's pinnacle of events occur annually at the beginning of March, but Sea Week does have a year-round mission, which is about exciting and inspiring all New Zealanders to strengthen their connection with the sea. This year, the Ngā Kōrero series is bringing us the 7 ocean literacy principles, and it's bringing them to life through both online and in-person events. It'll help us understand the ways our daily lives are intertwined with the ocean, no matter where we live. Now, don't forget, if you are interested in any of our previous webinars, which you might have missed, they've all been recorded. They are available to watch at any time on the Sea Week YouTube channel. We are also recording this webinar so you can watch it again, or if you like it, which I'm sure you will, you can share it with others. A huge thanks, of course, to the long-time supporters of Sea Week, the New Zealand National Commission for UNESCO, who make this webinar series possible. Right, down to business. Tonight's topic is all about exploring the unknown and uncovering some of the ocean's mysteries. The ocean, of course, is the largest habitat on Earth, yet we've explored less than 20% of it. Tonight, our speakers will take us to some of the most remote places on Earth, including the deep sea and the polar ocean. But it's not only the hard-to-reach places that hold mysteries to unravel. Even some of the largest and, you'd think, most familiar ocean animals hold secrets that we are just beginning to reveal. The first of our 3 speakers tonight will be Sadie Mills, who is a deep-sea biodiversity researcher and a collection manager at Earth Sciences New Zealand, formerly known as NIWA. Sadie was recently part of a research expedition into one of the major deep-sea canyon channels. Let me try that again. Canyon/channel systems in Aotearoa. We're thrilled to have Sadie with us to share her fascinating work and give us a glimpse into some mysteries of the deep. Next up will be Dr. Sarah Seabrook, also joining us from Earth Sciences New Zealand, and she's studying how the Antarctic is changing using advanced ocean technology. Sarah will take us under the ice to reveal surprising new discoveries about polar environments. Our final speaker is Dr. Krista van der Linde, who is joining us from Whale Watch Kaikoura, where her work is focused on marine mammals. She's going to reveal how little we know about some of our most iconic species and how important it is to fill those knowledge gaps. After all of the speakers have presented, I'll ask them your questions. You can send us your questions at any time, of course, using the Q&A function, which is also on the bottom of your screen. So let's get the show on the road. We're going to start now with Sadie Mills and a deep dive into New Zealand's Bounty Trough. Over to you, Sadie.
Kia ora, Alison. That's a really lovely introduction. Thank you. And hopefully by now you can all see my screen. And ko Sadie Mills, tōku ingoa. As Alison said, I'm the collection manager and the principal technician at Earth Sciences New Zealand, and I manage the invertebrate collection there. So today I'll give you a glimpse of our exciting biodiversity research voyage that we undertook in February 2024, so just last year, to survey animals and their habitats in an area of seabed that's never previously been explored, the Bounty Trough. First, in case you're interested to know what is a collection, so basically it's a giant room filled with compactors with jars and pails of preserved marine invertebrates. And so this is where any of the samples that we collect on our research expeditions and also bycatch that's sent in to us from fisheries observers gets brought into the collection. And then it's basically like a library of living things that we're able to make accessible to researchers from all around the world. And our collection dates back to the 1950s and is mainly from the deep sea. So we've got a really amazing treasure trove of interesting information in there. So Ocean Census, they are the people that are responsible, or the organization that's responsible for funding the Ocean Census Bounty Trough voyage. The Ocean Census organization is funded by the Nippon Foundation and Necton, and their main aim, or their main goal, is to accelerate the discovery and protection of ocean life. We want to discover as many species as possible that before they're at risk from impacts on the deep sea. And so they're the people that funded this research voyage, and I encourage you to jump over to their website and watch their videos and learn a little bit more about their mission. So we got together with Te Papa Tongarewa, the National Museum of New Zealand, and we got our records and we pulled them together, and we had a look at all of the samples that we already had and all of the places we already knew where we had collected either fishes or marine invertebrates from around Aotearoa. And you can see by this map on the left here, all of the yellow dots are where we already have samples from the deep sea. So it looks like quite a lot maybe to some people, but if you zoom in, those points get very, very tiny. And you can also see there's quite a lot of the deep sea, the very dark blue areas where we know virtually nothing. And so this little area in the pink box there, that's the Bounty Trough. So we decided that was an area where we really didn't actually know that much and that we'd like to explore a little bit more. It's a really interesting system. It's about 600 meters deep at the Otago Canyon end, and it goes about 800 kilometers long out to the fan, where it's 5 kilometers deep. So that's about equivalent to 15 sky towers deep if you stack the sky tower on top of each other. So that was our aim for the expedition. So we had lots of people on board with us. We had 16 crew and 19 scientists, scientists from Earth Sciences New Zealand, which was then called NIWA at the time, Te Papa Tongarewa, and from other ocean census partners from New Zealand universities and overseas research institutes. And so here's our vessel Tangaroa, and this is the map of where we went on our expedition. So we started off at Te Whanganui Atara in Wellington Harbour, and we moved south all the way down to off the Otago Shelf to explore the canyons and seamounts. So seamounts are undersea, like an extinct undersea volcano. So we went to those to explore all these different diversity of habitats. And then we moved out deeper and slowly got deeper and moved down the tributaries of the channel. And we looked at areas inside the channel in this big deep canyon that runs down the middle of the Bounty Trough, and also on the slopes on the edge, working our way out to the very deepest part and then back again to Wellington with all of our samples. And so that little map, that little video on the right-hand side just gives you an idea of how deep the Bounty Trough actually is if you compare it to some other recognizable icons of New Zealand. So how do we collect these samples? So we have a variety of different types of equipment that we use, which help us to try and get a look at all of the different sizes of animals and different ways of being able to get information about them. So this video that's running in the middle shows you some of our multi-beaming technology that we have on the ship, and that helps us to make a map of the seafloor so we can see what the seafloor looks like. Is there a big mountain under there, or is there this big channel, or is it flat, muddy bottom? And that helps us guide us how we're going to take our samples. In the top there, in the top left there, we have our deep towed imaging system, which is a video camera system that we use to have a look at what animals live on the seafloor using the video. We can see what lives there. We had a fish trap to collect bait-attracted fish, and we also had some sleds and trawls to collect the animals that live just on the top of the seafloor. And we also had on the bottom right-hand side a multi-corer, which is used to collect big plugs of mud deep down into the sediment and collect all the tiny animals that live in the mud. So on board, we managed to collect about 1,800 different types of samples on our voyage, which was 3 weeks long. So we did really well. We worked 24 hours a day to try and collect all the samples. Some of them we sorted on board and preserved individually, so we could collect, for example, like this big sea spider in the bottom that went into one jar, or the sea pig in the middle. And then other animals which are smaller, we have to either wash them and sieve out from the mud and put them into jars and then take them back to land, where we can then look at them under a microscope and get experts to help us identify them. This is a glimpse of what the seafloor looks like when we use our video camera. So here you can see these black Oreo fishes that are swimming just above the bottom, and these interesting sea urchins called tam o' shanters, which are like inflated sea urchins. They fill themselves up with water and kind of a squishy and almost leathery texture. And this is another habitat on a seamount in the Bounty Trough. You can see these beautiful golden corals, primnoa corals, like sea fans. And those are really great habitats for juvenile fish. And if you look closely, you might be able to see a crab walking across the seafloor there, some urchins, a sea star, and lots of sponges all across the bottom. So really amazing habitats that you get to see on the camera. And we also have a still camera, so we can get really high resolution footage of different types of animals at all different depths throughout the whole of the Bounty Trough system. So these are going to be used for lots of different ecological analyses to see all the different animals and what type of habitats they like to live in. And you get to see some really cool behaviors. This is a large Taningia squid, which we saw on the camera. And I'll just show you that video again. You can see these two laser dots are 20 centimeters apart. And the squid actually glows at us with this little light organ just at the top there. So it's really cool what the types of behaviors that you get to see when you're looking at these really deep sea creatures. So straight after the voyage, Ocean Census funded to us to have 2 workshops, one in March 2024, just days after the voyage came back. We rushed the samples back and all the experts were waiting with bated breath to see what we'd brought off the ship. And this is a selection of images from the first workshop. And then later on at a second workshop, we had just actually this year in February, we had a more focused workshop looking at crustaceans that were collected on the voyage. And that had, so the first workshop had 30 experts from a whole different heap of places around the world and from New Zealand. And then we also had the second one had 8 experts from 5 different countries. And we also had some of the people hosted over at Te Papa as well. So at the first workshop, we managed to get over 200 new species discovered. And this is just kind of a selection of images of the types of animals that we're able to find. We had 3 new eelpout fish, 78 mollusks, a new genus of black coral, 30 new crustacean species, 19 new bryozoan species. They're like little lace corals, and you can see one of those in the bottom middle of the image, this grey image here that looks like a kind of a tubular colony with little holes in it. That's a bryozoan, those that haven't seen that before. And 13 new sponges. There was also new depth range and geographic range extensions for a couple of species as well, and some really rare examples of other species. So that was an amazing, amazing output. And then at the second workshop I mentioned, we took these samples which had hundreds of little tiny crustaceans in them, and that's the picture on the top left there. And you can see one of our sorters who in Nelson, and Megan, and she sorted some of these samples along with a bunch of other Sciences New Zealand colleagues, and they sorted all these samples into these little tiny vials. Then we gave them to the experts, and then the experts discovered another 200 new species of crustaceans amongst the samples there. And that was all the work that they could get done in the 3 weeks that they visited us. There's actually more material that we still haven't been able to look through yet. So there's just a huge abundance of new things that were discovered. And it really shows you just how much effort, once you fund the effort for some experts to come and look at this material, and you sort this material, you can get really, really amazing results. Probably after most of our voyages, we will discover maybe, I think our average is 30 new species published a year from our collection alone, and that's only our collection. And there's collections all around the world that are doing this type of work. But when you put some effort into just looking at one particular place, it's just amazing how much impact you can get. So this is really where the work begins. So from that one voyage, we had about 410 potential new species so far, with many more samples to look at. And I think so far we just have one paper that's actually been published with 4 new species of nematode worm. So one paper started, but there's many more to come from just this one place. So yeah, it's really amazing effort that everybody went to. So I want to just thank the videographers, the vessel crew, and our science partners that made this voyage a success, and also the Nippon Foundation Nekton Ocean Census Program for funding all of this work, and also Hokanui Runanga from Ngāi Tahu, who partnered with us in exploring the taonga from the Bounty Trough, which is part of their Rohe Moana. And if you're keen, you can look at the QR code link there, and that will take you to a story map that we prepared, which has got heaps of videos, images, all sorts of information that you can look at if you want to delve into a bit more some of the types of equipment we use, some of the animals we found. We have heaps of information on there. And there's also a little very short documentary that you can watch about our voyage as well. So go check it out. And thank you very much.
Thanks, Sadie. That was brilliant. Two things, well, lots of things occurred to me. Two things in particular. One is how wonderful it is to have video and photos of the animals in situ, so that you get to see how they're behaving and moving, and then you've got the specimens to work with as well. And the other thing that really struck me was so many of those things are so beautiful and so colourful, and yet they all live in complete darkness. So what's that about?
Yeah, it's pretty
Anyway,
amazing.
yeah. If you have any questions, don't forget, ask away in the Q&A, and we'll come back to them after all of the speakers are presented. So thank you, Sadie. Now we're going somewhere completely different with Sarah Seabrook, our next presenter, and Sarah's going to take us along on her work at the bottom of the earth, and so off into the Southern Ocean we go. Over to you, Sarah.
Thank you very much. And you can see the slides all right?
Slides look great.
Great. Kia ora, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you all tonight. And I thought we would start by going back in time to the very beginning. And since the existence of a frozen continent at the bottom of our planet was suspected, discovering the secrets of Antarctica has really taken over the minds and in many ways the lives of explorers around the world. Attempts of traversing the icy continent made legends of a few of these explorers, such as Ernest Shackleton and his crew on the Endurance, who you can see here, who survived almost 2 years stranded on the icy continent when their ship was trapped in the sea ice. As we continued delving deeper into the Antarctic continent, questions of what lay below the ice consumed the minds of scientists and public alike. In early expeditions, such as the Ross and Discovery expeditions in the mid-1800s and early 1900s, hundreds of new marine species were found, as well as many new birds, such as the now famous penguins. Now, over just a century later, we have learned a lot about life below the frozen seas, and new discoveries continue almost every field season that we're down on the ice. We have learned how the Antarctic Circumpolar Current, which encircles the continent and was formed when South America broke away from the Drake's Passage almost 60 million years ago, formed this Antarctic Circumpolar Current, and how this forms an oceanic barrier between Antarctica and the rest of the world, leading to a high degree of endemicism or genetic uniqueness in the life found around Antarctica. Some of my favorite examples of this include the icefish, which has colorless hemoglobin-free blood that produces antifreeze proteins that help it live in these frozen seas where sea temperatures hover around minus 1.8 degrees Celsius year-round. And these tiny shrimp-like creatures called amphipods who have adapted to live in highly saline brine produced during sea ice formation, shown here on a brinicle, which is one of the things I find really cool under the sea ice. And these form when salt is excreted from sea ice as it forms, and that salt it drops downwards, and every water molecule it hits freezes, and you get these icicle-like features. And these amphipods have learned to really thrive in these really salty ecosystems on these brinicles and in brine channels in the sea ice as well. Another type of amphipod species that was in the news not too long ago, surprising us further with the conditions that many of these animals can survive in, were these amphipods that were found in abundance below 500 meters of ice, an area that many thought little to no life could exist, when a camera was lowered through a hole that was drilled through the Ross ice shelf, 500-meter long hole, and these animals were found swimming around down there. There's also many alien-like creatures that have been discovered in these frozen seas, such as these giant nemertine worms, which produce an acidic mucus that wards off prey. And these worms are not the only giants on the seafloor either. Similar to the deep sea environments that Sadie was just telling us about, the historically cold and stable conditions of the Southern Ocean have led to extremely slow-growing species that can live for tens of thousands of years and grow to be abnormally large, such as these sponges, which are one of the largest species of sponge in the world, and the ones shown here are likely close to 15,000 years old. But the stability of the polar seas is increasingly being lost amidst ongoing and rapid shifts to the system from ongoing climate change. With these shifts have come unpredictable and unprecedented changes to the marine environment that we are studying, and with it many new discoveries that bring a sense of urgency to the science we are doing and the connections that we are making. My collaborators and I have been working for the past decade on lesser known and understood Antarctic environment known as methane seeps. These are habitats that form as fluid and gas migrate through the subsurface of the seafloor or from the base of glacial systems and emerge as gas bubbles or methane-rich fluid that can dramatically alter the local ecosystem. A decade ago, when we first started this work, there were no known active methane seeps in the entire Southern Ocean. These methane seeps, they were first discovered in the early 1980s, and they're known to occur in ocean basins across the globe. But before the work here, none had been found in the Southern Ocean. Through a series of seagoing and on-ice campaigns with international coordination, we now know of dozens of methane seeps spanning the coastline of the Ross Sea, where our work has been focused. In the McMurdo Sound region, we have identified 9 distinct regions of seafloor seepage, with each region having many instances of seeps occurring. And then further north, using ship-based techniques, we have found over 30 new fluid and gas flares associated with seep activity. And in this northern Victoria Land area, where we've been using ship-based methods, we've discovered these seeps thanks to advances in technologies such as water column acoustic sounding, where pulses of sound are sent down from the ship towards the seafloor, and they rebound back when they hit just even the most subtle difference in density compared to the surrounding seawater. And so here in this figure, you can see these bright reflections are that sound reflecting back. And this is a survey line off of a glacier in northern Victoria Land called Tucker Glacier. And you can see when we move out from the floating glacial tongue that is over the subglacial ocean, you can see the meltwater that's coming off of that glacier. From below that, you can see subglacial flux that is coming out from below the glacier. And then as you move along the seafloor, which is this line here, you can see fluid seeps and gas seeps that are moving that occur across the entire coastline and give these really bright reflections as the gas bubbles give really strong returns with the acoustic signatures. In addition to these surveys with the ship-based techniques, we've had a lot of work ongoing in this in the further south region of McMurdo Sound. And the seeps here have really been identified just with visual observation. So these have been found at sites that have been historically explored for other purposes. And over time, these white microbial mats were found to be appearing on the seafloor. And these white microbial mats are sulfide oxidizing microbial mats, with the sulfide being a product that is produced by chemical reactions at these methane seeps. And this white microbial mat, it stands in really stark contrast to the seafloor, helping us to identify these habitats. And while we've had many discoveries over the past decade, this past field season that we had last October, November, was really filled with some of the most exciting and surprising discoveries to date. This includes finding extensive areas of gas bubbles that are fluxing out of the seafloor, and you can see these gas bubbles here, and they might not be crazy big, but it's actually the first time we've ever seen anything like this in the area, and it was really exciting and surprising to us, and also just how continuously they were leaving the seafloor. We also found areas where there was the rapid emission of fluids, creating this rippling effect along the seafloor that you can see in the lower right-hand corner of this video. And this is something as well that had never been seen before, and we were really surprised to find it. And it really shows just how much fluid could be coming out of the seafloor here and how fast it could be moving. We also used our remotely operated vehicle to do the first ever exploration along the submarine extent of Barne Glacier on Ross Island. And as we descended down this glacier and reached the seafloor where the glacier meets the seafloor, we found iron-rich seafloor seepage that was creating these orange microbial mats that you can see in the lower right-hand side, with these microbial mats being iron oxidizing microbial mats. And again, this is the first time that we'd seen anything like this in the area. The most exciting and surprising and strange discovery of all, though, was this mysterious methane-rich brine lake, which was about 30% saltier than seawater and created this really strange, misty appearance that none of us, including divers who've been working in the area for over 30 years, had ever seen before. It still strikes me today just for how alien-like it looks, and this really misty kind of cloudy effect that you get near the seafloor that it has never been seen before in the area. These discoveries, while really exciting in nature, are also concerning. We're discovering these seeps at locations where there's been decades of previous work, and there were no seeps present prior to the discoveries reported here. So that allows us to know that these seeps are newly emergent features, and that they're apparently rapidly increasing in number. Every time we go back, we're finding more and more in the same areas. We're actively working to fully quantify what's causing these seeps to form and what the impacts might be. But current indications from the data we have indicate that this seep emergence is a result of ongoing climate impacts in the region. There's a real human element to the work that we have going on down here as well, because many of the collaborators in this work are among those who've been studying this region for decades prior. And seeing and hearing how shocked and perplexed they are by what we are seeing really underscores the unpredictability and unprecedented nature of this change, as well as the potential local and global feedbacks. Globally, methane is a very powerful greenhouse gas, and there's predicted to be a significant amount of it stored in Antarctic reservoirs, over 21,000 gigatons. When we look here at this video, this is the underside of the sea ice, and you can see these gas bubbles on the underside of the sea ice. And these are formed from the gas bubbles we saw earlier that were leaving the seafloor, rising up and reaching the bottom of this sea ice. This methane could be available for exchange with the atmosphere when it reaches the surface like this. And when it's under the sea ice, maybe the sea ice is forming a cap and trapping this methane in the ocean. But when ice is thin or has lots of fractures, studies have shown some gas can make it through. And also these areas that we are working, the ice breaks out every year, and so there's months where there is no ice coverage where this methane would be able to exchange with the atmosphere. And this could be potentially adding a currently unaccounted for source of additional greenhouse gases to the atmosphere, which is particularly concerning as methane is 80 times more powerful as a greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide over a 20-year period. Locally, we're finding dramatic impacts to ecosystems that have long lived in these regions, such as the creation of biological dead zones and hotspots of seep activity. And we have here an example shown of an apparent mass die-off of an endemic and highly abundant clam species known as Laternula. And our data to date indicates this was potentially due to oxygen drawdown from the oxidation of methane, but we're working to further confirm this. These observations have been seen at a variety of seeps we have been discovering where there appears to be a negative impact, where these newly emergent seeps and the chemicals that they're releasing are causing impacts to the local community that are reducing their survivability. However, globally, methane seeps are very common along continental margins that span our world ocean. And at these established seep sites that have been around for hundreds to thousands of years, we see local communities well adapted to the presence of these seeps. On the left-hand side here, we see a seep environment where you have octopus, anemones, crabs, and many other species living in abundance at the seep. And we've even found that many of these animals can eat nutrition produced by the seep chemistry. We also have seen how in these established seep environments, you can have dynamic microbial communities that are oxidizing the methane that's being released from the seafloor, essentially forming a sediment filter to that methane and reducing the amount of methane that is making it into the ocean, and therefore the amount of methane that would be able to make it into the atmosphere. It's unclear whether we'll see this at the emerging Antarctic seeps, but our work at the first discovered seep in the region, the cinder cone seep, has shown that surrounding animals are beginning to come back into the seep site more and more. Even just this past year, we saw some anemones and many other animals that were beginning to come back into the seep. And we're also seeing an obvious microbial adaptation in response to the seep formation. This figure here on the right-hand side, it's a non-metric multidimensional scaling plot. Each point basically is just the entire microbial community in the sample. And what you can just see here is that when the seep first formed in 2012, there's been a dramatic shift since then to what we are seeing now, where we're seeing actually some indications that there are some methane oxidizing microbes beginning to appear in these samples. And it's indicating the potential that perhaps a sediment filter to the methane release might one day form as these seeps continue developing. There's a lot of work to still be done in our understanding of this phenomenon. We're heading back south this October, and we'll be working to better understand the evolution of these emerging seeps, including using technology such as this benthic lander, which has methane sensor, carbon dioxide, oxygen, as well as cameras that will work throughout an entire year of deployment, which we'll recover next year. And we'll use this data to try to understand how methane flux is changing throughout seasonal cycles, and as well how throughout the year, the distribution of animals on the seafloor are changing, and over time, if we see perhaps behavioral shifts where animals become more adapted to the seep environment. We'll also continue our expanded explorations by coupling scuba diver surveys with the enhanced capacity of these remotely operated vehicles that we've been using, where scuba diver surveys have a limited reach of about 50 meters from the hole in the ice for our explorations, which really limits our ability to explore wide areas. But with these remotely operated vehicles, we can go 300 to 400 meters away from these dive holes, allowing us to get much better spatial coverage and a better understanding of the extent of this process. Thank you all for your time, and thank you to all of the collaborators and institutes who helped make this work possible.
Wow, thank you, Sarah. Do you dive yourself?
I do, yes. I haven't dove down there for a few years, but I have in the past.
Wow. Well, it just seems to be a case down in Antarctica, in fact, everywhere. Like, if you seek, you shall find, and you're finding amazing stuff. And I feel like I should have known this, but I had no idea there were sponges that lived to 15,000 years old. That's absolutely amazing. I look forward to some more information coming out in the Q&A. Speaking of which, people, don't forget to post your questions. The Q&A tab is at the bottom of the screen. We'd love to hear from you. But before we get to those questions, so you've still got a few minutes, we have a wonderful final presentation ahead of us from Krista van der Linde. Krista is going to share some of the biggest remaining mysteries about our marine mammals. Take it away, Krista.
Thank you very much, Alison. Thank you for the kind introduction. It's been great listening to the other speakers today. And thank you also for inviting me to present as part of Sea Week. This is a bit of a shift onto not so deep for lots of different species, but, you know, particularly for sperm whales, but quite a shift into the kind of marine megafauna field. So my topic is the ocean is largely unexplored, but so too are its marine mammals. And the reason why this is
interrupt a second, Krista.
Oh, yes.
We seem to be seeing your view of your screen rather than just
Oh, okay, got you. No worries. Let me just see if I can fix that. Gotcha. Give me one moment. I knew there'd be a technical difficulty.
There's always something.
After a power outage all day. Here we are. That looking better?
That looks much better. Thank you so much. Sorry to interrupt.
Beautiful. No worries. So yeah, marine mammals, you think, are quite a charismatic group of animals that most people love when they see, but they often also think that a lot is known about them because they are, you know, sighted around New Zealand and well loved by people. But unfortunately, we still don't know a lot about marine mammals, even though we've studied them in regions for a long time. So that's what this presentation is mainly about. And I'm just going to start back at the beginning. If I can get the slide to turn. There we go. Back at the beginning where I started in New Zealand, this was up in Auckland. And so my task was to study common dolphins, which you think would be quite common and, you know, well known. But we didn't even know an abundance estimate for the Hauraki Gulf. And so that was what my task was over a sort of a 5-year period with Massey University, was doing my PhD on IDing every single individual which was in this area to find out, you know, a baseline population estimate for something that's technically a very common species. And the other picture you see here is of a Brutus whale. This is another species which is found in the Hauraki Gulf and has quite a small population and is listed as nationally critical. But even at that time, we didn't have an updated abundance estimate for that animal. So that was quite surprising and a quite unique introduction to my marine mammal career within New Zealand. And then during my time while I was in Auckland, after my PhD, a character which you see in the top right corner named Ophir turned up in West Haven Marina in Auckland, which is the busiest marina in the Southern Hemisphere. And she caused quite a lot of havoc, basically turning up on boats and popping dinghies and scaring people. And so I was tasked as a Marine Ranger at Department of Conservation to be able to find a solution to this problem. And the idea was that leopard seals don't belong in New Zealand, they belong in the Antarctic, and we didn't really have any scientific evidence for this. So that sent me on a little bit of a quest to find out across New Zealand what we knew about New Zealand's leopard seals. And we found that they were found back in the Maori Middens in the 1200s, so they were indeed a native species of New Zealand and had been here a long time. But we basically had no scientific evidence behind anything that they do in New Zealand. So during my career at NIWA, I spent a lot of time researching these animals and understanding the absolute basics of this species that, you know, we sight around New Zealand, but we really didn't know a lot about. Then my next journey sent me to a place where I currently call home, which is Kaikoura. And as most people know, this is the marine mammal hotspot around New Zealand. So a lot of people think that a lot is known about marine mammals here. and especially really, great databases, because we have airplanes in the sky every day, we have boats on the water. So you would think there's a really great long-term research project that's been here for many years. And the truth is, for a species sort of diversity-wide, we don't have that. We've been really lucky to have Otago University collecting data here for 35 years on sperm whales. And there's some tourism operators such as Whale Watch or Dolphin Encounter that have their own databases, but a collective long-term database for all species in this region didn't exist, which was really mind-blowing for me, considering that we all know these animals so well. And that's taken me into my next role. I'm now working at Whale Watch and leading a research team there. And what we're really trying to do is pull together all of that historical data from Whale Watch, and now even into other areas. We've had really great local support of all of the area operators offering their data to us. We're really trying to just start at the very beginning of building a long-term database for all of these species for multiple operators in the area, so we can really try and understand some trends over time. So even though these animals are well cited, it doesn't mean we actually know a lot about their lives. And that brings me to a classification system which is monitored by the Department of Conservation, which is called a threat classification system. And it's basically New Zealand's way to assess species risk of extinction within New Zealand. We want to find out basically, how do our numbers compare to something like the International Union for Conservation of Nature's Red List of threatened species? Some people may know of that. We want to basically create our own so we know about the extinction risks of our species. And an independent group gets together and looks at various groups of taxa over 5 years. And they did that actually earlier this year in April for marine mammals. And it was really good to see that some species had lowered in their categories of threat, which was wonderful. But one thing that really stood out to me is our data deficient species. So we have 21 out of 57, which equates to around 36.8%, that we don't know a lot about, which is really surprising considering that, as I say, these animals are well watched and well loved by people, but we don't necessarily have a lot of scientific information behind understanding their ecology. And why this is of concern is it highlights how much we don't know about many of our native species, especially our marine mammals. It also highlights that we lack basic information about things such as population size. And if we can't assess if this is stable or declining, how are we ever going to know how close they are to extinction? And the last thing is effective conservation relies on this knowledge of actually understanding species and knowing where they live, knowing where they remain, and knowing what pressures they face. And if we don't have that, a lot of the unknowns remain a mystery. I'm going to shift gears here to my career with leopard seals, because as I said before, it's a species which was found in Maori middens since the 1200s. Yet when I started this research, there were still a lot of unknowns. They are classified currently as a vagrant under the DOC threat classification system. So we know that these animals are most likely coming from the Antarctic, but we have a lot of individuals which have stayed in New Zealand a long time. We've had one individual, Ophir, which we monitored here for 9 years. So it's not necessarily well understood why these animals are coming here, why they're coming in greater numbers, and why they're staying when they have an Antarctic ecosystem basically at their doorstep. What we do know about leopard seals is that they are regular and have a year-round presence here, confirmed by thousands of records we now have in our database. There was one notable individual, Ophir, who was a long-term Auckland resident. She also spent a lot of time in Northland, and that helped us sort of reclassify the species and understand a lot more about them. We do have some documented births on the mainland, which was quite interesting to find. There were 3 different births that we saw, one that I actually was able to witness, which was incredible. So these animals are normally known as an Antarctic species for breeding, but we have had some anomalies here. We know that they are opportunistic feeders, so they're basically living in a bit of heaven in New Zealand. They can feed on anything they want. They've even switched to some strange species like sharks, and we have noted some seasonal variation. And their protection status, it's least concern overall worldwide, but in New Zealand, they are vagrant and they are protected. And main things that we are concerned around are things around entanglement or disturbance. So I'm just going to highlight here some key knowledge gaps that we don't know. So we have no idea of the abundance of leopard seals around New Zealand. So despite knowing that they've been here for a long time, that doesn't mean that we have a robust idea of how many are in New Zealand at any one time or how those numbers are changing. For instance, in the last, say, 3 years, we've seen a dramatic decline in the number of individuals we've seen across the country, and we don't actually know how to explain that. Another thing that we don't know a lot about is their movement patterns. So we do know that leopard seals are generally solitary. They're found in multiple regions around New Zealand, but we don't know actually how they move. We don't really get a lot of data on individuals over time to be able to monitor this. Ophir was again our anomaly. We had pretty much predictable shifts between Northland and Auckland almost to the day that she did for many years. So she was a really interesting one, but for most we don't understand their movements. We haven't ever documented any mating behaviours in New Zealand, and I said there was only 3 births here, so we really don't know a lot about the sex structure or age structure of individuals here. We also don't know how many juveniles have been sighted. This is a really interesting thing because we have a lot of juveniles sighted in New Zealand that are of a good body condition, but they're arriving on New Zealand shores in that good body condition. So that would suggest that perhaps they are breeding somewhere closer than the Antarctic because it is a long travel time to get here, but we still have that as a mystery. We don't have any real understanding of their population structure and demographics, so understanding how that affects their population viability over time. And lastly, we really don't understand how they can adapt to non-ice environments. So this is obviously a very different climate to something in the Antarctic. It's very normal to see leopard seals, especially giving birth, on the ice, but to actually do that in New Zealand and understanding why they do that is still unknown. And this matters because without knowing their abundance, it's impossible to monitor any trends over time. We can't actually manage them effectively. So, for instance, Ophir in Auckland was an anomaly, and she was in a lot of trouble with people and having those human interactions. Without actually knowing where leopard seals are around New Zealand, how can we manage threats like that? And lastly, we don't have that scientific insight. So understanding their reproduction or demographics that will influence our understanding of their ecology overall. I'm going to shift now to the new species I'm working with, which is sperm whales, which I've said is a well-studied species, although we have a lot of unknowns. So it's actually a really good thing that this year sperm whales were uplifted from the data deficient box into the at-risk declining box, and that's thanks to Otago University's work for many years looking at their abundance declines over time. What we do know is that the Kaikoura Canyon supports a really rare near-shore resident male population, so it's sub-adults that are here all year round. They're a real key to our whale watching industry, but they are at risk, which is concerning. We have had lots of strandings of them and mass strandings and entanglements that we don't know a lot about. And we do know that they are deep divers, that males are much larger than females. They have quite complex social structures, but that is still also something that we want to look further into. For our Kaikoura sperm whales, we know that they enjoy deep canyon waters, so often over 1,000 metres. We have those resident subadult males. They are here year-round, but we have had population declines over the last 20 years that are concerning. We have been able to use acoustics to understand their size structure, so you can actually, from an acoustic recording, find out whether you're, say, listening to a male or a female based on their size. And they are central to our whale watching industry, which means that they are a really significant species to look at, the unknowns, because we really need to protect them, not only from their inherent value as a Tonga species, but also because of our reliance on them within a whale watching community. The Otago University team has done a great job over 35 years, as I said, studying these animals, and what they have noted is a dramatic decline. So from around 1991, there are around 80 individuals, and now we're sort of hovering around 40 individuals that are known to this region. So that is of concern. And our key knowledge gaps, one of them is around where do they go? Interestingly, sperm whales, the males are found sort of on the more southern South Island east coast and almost up into sort of that Cook Strait area. That's their home range. We know that the females are up in Northland, but there's never been one match of a Kaikoura male individual anywhere past the Cook Strait, which is really interesting. Just to highlight that, the 3 matches that we do have, we had one individual called Moby, which was sighted in our area since 2014, and there were some recent sightings of this animal. And it was sighted by a photographer who was on the Cook Strait ferry, got an image match, and we matched it to the Kaikoura population. So that was our first one. The second one was by a University of Otago student who was working off the Dunedin area, looking at the Otago canyons. She was able to match an individual we call NN95, which has been seen here in Kaikoura since 2006, also some recent sightings, and that match was made in 2023. So it just shows you that, you know, even though we know a lot about these whales, only a few photo ID matches around the whole country, which is really incredible. What we don't know is anything really around their stranding data. So even though there has been numerous strandings, there hasn't been many postmortems done of those animals. We don't know a lot about their movements, population structure, or connectivity. So as I said, while we know where the male sperm whales are and we know where the female sperm whales are, they should be joining up. We know as Kaikoura is one of the main areas that they're coming to feed in our canyon, and then eventually they will move off, but we don't actually know where they move to or where they're coming from. We also have limited information on their diet. So we have some knowledge for Kaikoura, but a greater detail of analysis is needed from things like stable isotope analysis to look at foraging patterns and roles of different individuals across the whole of New Zealand. While Kaikoura is well studied for abundance, we don't actually know that around New Zealand, what the abundance estimate would be for the entire population of sperm whales, which is obviously of concern considering the local decline that we have noticed in Kaikoura over the last 20 years. A big unknown is what their response might be to environmental change. So a wonderful paper by my colleague, Katharina Peters at Massey University, and other authors found that as climate change shifts towards the year 2100, that our area of suitable habitat will absolutely decline, and our sperm whales may move out of regions such as Kaikoura that they've always known to be. So that's a real worry. So why these unknowns matter, we need to be able to effectively manage the populations, and without those numbers, we really can't understand that. We don't understand their resilience. Is that population even going to be in the same area that it once has been? We want to be able to anticipate threats such as climate change and understand how that will affect populations. And we want to also understand their abundance so we can monitor those at-risk populations. So part of my new work at Whale Watch is running a research program where we're actually collecting long-term data to try and understand the movement and the health status of all different types of cetaceans across New Zealand, but the main one we will be working with is sperm whales. So if you'd like any further information about that or volunteer opportunities, feel free to drop me an email. And lastly, just thank you to all of our wonderful collaborators from all of the projects I've worked on, for all of you for listening tonight, and for Seaweek for inviting me to do this talk. So thank you.
Thank you, Krista. That was really interesting. 3 fantastic topics. I had no idea that we had leopard seals that had given birth in New Zealand. Do we have any idea what happened to those pups?
None of them survived, interestingly. So two we know didn't survive, and the third one was euthanized because that was actually in Dunedin, the one that was euthanized because it wasn't suckling from mum. So yeah, what that points out, I guess, is births can happen, but they're not viable. And this is why one of the reasons why they are still classified as a vagrant, because Antarctic species, they do survive and go on to grow into adulthood, and we don't have that in New Zealand. So it's really interesting to me are the animals that are coming to New Zealand, sort of a ecosystem rebel that's trying out a new area and actually something to look at as well. We need to protect this, or is it seen as a real anomaly that's not surviving? And which one that is an interesting question. So,
Okay, thank you. And interesting too that there were remains of leopard seals in some of those early Māori middens.
yeah, I was very shocked to find that. I didn't think, we had any knowledge sort of past the last 20 years. And so, the more literature I digged into, the more I found actually we do know bits and pieces about these animals. And that was a real big puzzle piece for me of putting together. People said, well, leopard seals don't live here, they don't belong here. And that changed how we manage the species in New Zealand. Do we pick Opha up and throw her back in the Antarctic? That was a suggestion, and it's like, well, no, they have always been here, maybe in a different context to what we have now, but that doesn't mean that they don't, have an inherent right to be here as well. So, yeah.
Exactly. Okay, well, we're just about up to Q&A time, but we had a technical glitch with our poll earlier, so we're going to post that again and see if it works better this time. Or I can see it, so hopefully everyone out there can see it. Please quickly pop on and answer it. In the meantime, we have some questions coming in. Here's a big one, which is, I'll get all of our speakers to have a go at this, maybe in the order in which they presented. So Sadie, then Sarah, and then... So the question is, what do you reckon the greatest challenge New Zealand is facing today in marine science?
I think right now, I would say it is possibly going to be funding. And that might be a similar answer from all of us, in that we have so many questions and things that we would like to answer and study, and not enough money to employ enough scientists to do the work. That would be, from my perspective especially, we have many, many unidentified things and material that needs working on. So yeah, that would be the hardest thing.
Great, thank you. Just before we get to Sarah, Krista, can you unshare your screen, please?
Sure.
We can see your desktop.
Oh, that's no good. Let me get that happening.
We'd much rather see everyone's lovely faces.
How about that?
Oh, that looks wonderful.
Good.
Okay, so Sarah, what do you reckon the greatest challenge New Zealand is facing today in marine science, apart from lack of funding?
Oh,
Yeah, funding is of course an issue. I would say how rapidly everything is changing in a lot of the systems that we're studying. I think it's something globally that a lot of marine scientists and earth scientists are really struggling with. You come up with a study that you're going to do somewhere, and maybe you have a few years of study in that environment, but then each year you're going back, it's different than the year before, and it makes it quite hard to plan the studies that you're doing, but also to try and capture that change in a way where you can explain what is happening. And I think that's where a lot of the technologies that are being developed for marine science are really coming in, that are enabling us to collect data when we're not there. So instruments that we can put out in the ocean or on the seafloor to collect data over year, 2-year cycles when we're not able to be there, and help us understand what's happening between point A when we're there 1 year and point B when we're there another year, and better understand that change.
Great. Krista, the greatest challenge.
I would agree with the other two speakers, and I must admit, with Sadie, that the first thing that come to mind is funding. And I guess this is a follow-on issue from the lack of funding, is almost a lack of planning for the future. So without those long-term data sets to exist over time, when we're really desperate to answer a question, we expect that that data will be there in an organised fashion to answer the question. And we don't have that. Even looking at marine mammals as one example, to have 36 odds, % of species just sitting in a box that we don't know a lot about is really worrying. So, we find that a lot of species that do get funded might be, say, something that there's a fisheries impact. So therefore, we know a lot about them because it matters to us. But we don't know what's going to change in the future. We don't know what climate change will bring. We don't know what species we're going to have to quickly get up to speed and understand. And without those long-term data sets to go, right, we have that in existence. Let's go back and have a look over time to see where we're at now. How will we answer those questions? So really basic, boring data that obviously doesn't get funded a lot, but its actual importance is huge for our future planning. So, yeah, management of that, I think, is a real challenge.
Yeah, long-term data sets give the most amazing insights when you go back and interrogate them.
Yeah. And also thinking about, if you don't have that funding, how do you create that long-term data set? You know, the New Zealand public have been incredible for a leopard seal data set. That wasn't mine. That wasn't the organisation I was working with. That was the New Zealand public that collected that data, of just an outcry of, have you got any information? We need it, and sending in for years, building an incredible database that cost nothing. You know, so a species that we knew nothing about and we had no funding for, we actually learnt a lot. So actually just thinking outside the box instead of just going, oh, well, they're data deficient, leave it at that. Like, it's not good enough, really. You know, we need to do better for lots of species, and we need to think about that.
Indeed. Now, here's a question from Shay, who I think has been very inspired by you three. Her question is, for someone finishing their bachelor's degree in marine science, about to do a master's next year, what's a good way to get into the industry like you guys did? Or what would you recommend as an effective way to make connections or get some experience? So let's just do it in the same order again, because Sadie's had a few minutes off, so we'll put her in the spotlight again.
Thank you. Yeah, great question. My thoughts are always go out and introduce yourself to people that do job that you've met, or that you get the opportunity to meet, and go and have a coffee with them. Go and ask to have a tour of their work, and go and make yourself known, basically. And if there is an opportunity to do some volunteer work or an internship, those are really good options to get yourself known and get some experience. But even just going out and getting work experience in any job alongside the study is really, really great, because it shows that you're going out there into the workforce as well. But yeah, I think knowing people, making connections as much as you can. And even if you don't know anyone from a workplace, then start with a lecturer or something like that at university, or a teacher or something, and they might know somebody. Yeah.
Anything to add to that, Sarah?
I think that was a really great answer. Yeah, I think internships and reaching out and just trying to connect with people. I think, you know, when you're first starting out, trying to apply for a variety of different internships, summer internships, for example, and trying out different types of science and different types of work to see what really excites you and what you really feel a good fit with. And then also, if there's something that you're really inspired by, doing some Googling and finding people who are working in that space and just emailing them and trying to connect with them and talk with them, and do some work with them if possible. I think that's how a lot of us probably got started in what we're doing.
Krista, just before I get you to answer that as well, I'll also add a question from Billy who asks, is it easy to get work and get involved on expeditions or go to Antarctic bases or help out with whale watching at any skill level from basic to skilled? In other words, what type of skills are helpful for this type of work?
Yeah, really good questions. Yeah, I agree with Sadie and Sarah on their answers. I would also probably put in a suggestion that, because I work in the marine mammal field, a lot of people only want to work with certain species. And so I would say keep your options open, because actually what you're wanting to get experience in, what your job eventually will be in, is with a skill, not a species. So I may have been very biased in the beginning of, I only want to do killer whales. And it's like, well, you know, maybe the opportunity isn't there for that, or maybe someone else is doing it, or maybe there's no funding for it. But what is the skill behind your work with killer whales? Are you doing photo ID? Are you doing modeling? Are you using AI? And what jobs out there pay for things? Because, you know, not many jobs will say, I'd like you to sit for 5 years and make a catalogue of common dolphins. No one cares to do that, you know, but maybe they'll go, can you really quickly model something? Can you use GIS? You know, can you use AI and a computer model to, you know, map me a whale tail? They're the future for jobs. So if you actually want to be employed and stay in an industry for a long term, don't think about the species you want to work with or sort of the fun. Think about, you know, what's the skill I'm going to pick up? And maybe I'll have to do that with frogs in the beginning, no offense to frog researchers, or maybe I'll have to do that with deep sea worms, and then I'll get to work on that with a whale. But, you know, don't lose your passion, but also think broad, because you never know where that skill will end up.
I will echo that. I have a terrestrial zoology degree, and I studied feral sheep on subantarctic Campbell Island, not because I wanted to study sheep in particular, but I really wanted to go to
Right.
Campbell Island. So sometimes you
Yeah.
just do what it takes.
And volunteer,
And
volunteer, volunteer. Unfortunately, I hate that that's our world, that when you love something, you end up having to do it for free for quite a bit. But you test out each internship or volunteer opportunity to find those things. What do you like to do? Are you bored by genetics, but you just, you light up at, ship strikes, whatever it is that's your thing. How will you find that if there actually doesn't exist, any paid employment? So use those internships and volunteer opportunities to find out really what it is you want to do, so you can hone in even further to that opportunity that you really want.
agree. Now, here's a question for Sadie from Michelle, who says, did you see any plastic on your voyages?
Yep, that's a really good question. So, anecdotally, I would say probably every voyage I've been on, we've seen at least a seafloor image that has some kind of rubbish or left behind fishing gear or something like that in it. But actually, I thought I do know there was a study done in 2021 by some colleagues for Fisheries New Zealand, which you can Google and find because I just found it to remind myself what it was. And out of 169,000 images of the seafloor that NIWA had taken between 2006 and 2021, only 149 of those had marine litter in them. So what I remember, so that's not actually very many out of quite a lot of images, but also taken, if you think about that, we've only surveyed a very tiny, 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 tiny part of the ocean. I think humans have seen less than 0.01% of the ocean, was a fact that I read the other day. So we've only seen a tiny part. So we're probably very biased. We're also very biased in that we've looked at a lot of the deep sea. So, interestingly, I think they found that most of the litter was within 25 kilometers of the coast, but there were still records, thousands of kilometers away from the shore where we found rubbish on the seafloor. So it is out there, and we are impacting the deep sea with rubbish. I think 138 of the images had plastic rubbish in it, which was one of your question, which was the question. So, and 123 were linked to fishing or boating, and 11 glass bottles or drink cans. So they really dug into the imagery for that report. But yeah.
I've been talking about pine pollen with people at the moment because there's pine pollen everywhere. And it reminds me of a story I did with your colleague Daniel Leduc, who was looking at nematode worms in the Kermadec Trench. And he was finding pine pollen grains at the bottom of the Kermadec Trench. And he even found a grommet, which is, from memory, a simple single cell organism with a pine pollen grain inside it, which it had eaten.
Yeah.
And that's remarkable.
Yeah.
A question for Krista from Carl, who says, have you been able to tag any of the leopard seals?
Question. No, we haven't been. We were given a permit from Department of Conservation last year to be able to put flipper tags on. So that will be a start. We haven't actually started that work yet, basically because the numbers really decline compared to what we were expecting. So actually getting to those individuals can be quite hard. And we do need to do some training before we actually go out and put those tags on. So we haven't as yet, but more invasive tagging is quite difficult. Basically, nobody's done this in New Zealand for leopard seals, so actually being the first to do it is a bit of a novel concept. So Department of Conservation are a little bit cautious around that because we don't know a lot about leopard seal behaviour, and actually keeping humans safe is the number one. And also we don't know the risks to these animals long term by putting different types of tags in them. So we've gone with the most minimally invasive tag, which is a flipper tag with just a number on it. So hopefully if OFA turns up in Chile, at least we'll have a big yellow sticker that looks like a New Zealand tag, and we'll be able to know. But no, we haven't as yet, but it's definitely on the to-do list. Whales are also a, really interesting, candidate for tagging. But, something like a sperm whale, it requires a very large tag to go through a layer of skin, blubber and muscle. And with a really limited population, actually doing anything that might affect them is sort of a little bit, we have a cautious approach. So until we exhaust every other opportunity of doing photo ID and matching around the country, we won't move on to that for sperm whales just yet.
A question for Sarah. Are there any more densely populated seep ecosystems that you found under the ice yet, or only ones that seem newer without very developed communities?
That's a very good question. We've only found ones that are newer without very developed communities to date, but I think there's a fair amount of evidence that there should be more developed seeps that exist in the region. For example, a fisheries vessel maybe 15 years ago reported finding these chemosynthetic clams that are seep endemic. So they live at seep sites and they have microbes that live within them and oxidize the chemicals at seeps. They were found from some work in the Ross Sea area, so it indicates that they're probably there. What we're observing and researching is much shallower than what that survey was done at. We're looking about 200 meters and shallower, but I think it really underscores the many discoveries that could still come from the area, and I wouldn't be surprised if within the next 5 or 10 years a scientific survey does find a more developed seep somewhere in the region.
Great. Let me just look through our list of questions. Sadie, what's the most surprising or fascinating thing you've seen in your deep sea surveys?
It's a really good question, and it's so hard for me to answer. Every trip, there's a different thing. The last trip that I went on actually was really cool. I got to go down in a submersible, which is really cool. And for me, the coolest thing was actually seeing a sea pig in real life. So sea pigs are like a type of sea cucumber, which kind of look a little bit not very exciting maybe in the shallow water, but in the deep sea they look very cute, and they have really cute little tentacles and little feet. So I don't know, if you Google sea pig, you'll get lots of fun pictures to look at. But that's my in terms of surprising things, what I find really cool is just the number of like really cool new species. So when I've seen something on a voyage and I'm like, what the heck is this thing? And then I'll go back to land and show it to some of the amazing experts that we have, and they're like, oh yeah, this is a type of sea squirt, and it's really rare, and we've never found it in New Zealand waters before, or something like that. So there's just every voyage there's something new and cool, and that's what's cool about my job.
Well, I was amazed just by how many new species you found on that Bounty Trough voyage, and it makes you wonder, how many more are out there to find.
Yeah. So Daniel Leduc that you were mentioning earlier, he works on nematode worms, and he went down to the local Hataitai beach and he got a little scoop of mud from there, and he found new species in the scoop of mud from the beach. So it's all about where you look and what type of animals you're looking for. And sometimes the big things might have already been described, but also surprisingly, they're still discovering new species of whale out there when they're using genetics and things like that. So yeah, it's just that we need to look. We need to keep looking, keep asking questions.
A question for Krista from Shay, who says, if many mammals in New Zealand are listed as data deficient, from your perspective, what or who are the highest priority research gaps?
Well, that's a hard one. I'm probably very biased by my job and where I live, with the sperm whales declining. We may only see 2, 3, 4, 5 sperm whales, for each season at a time, which is really surprising considering that we run a whole tourism industry off that. So for me, that's a huge priority. It's been great that it's been uplifted to at risk. That's a really good step. But I think, yeah, that's really driven us to, we needed to get out of that data deficient box to be able to learn more. So that's definitely a priority. Of the other species that are listed, I think it matters around what we know about populations globally as well. We need to tie all of that together. For instance, there's some species that we, have in New Zealand that we don't know a lot about, and also we don't know a lot about globally. So we actually have a real opportunity to advance that knowledge for, ecosystem-wide, ocean-wide basins. And I think that that's a real priority because, we have an impact that we can make that, somewhere else may not be able to make those connections without us doing that. So, yeah, I wouldn't say there's any in particular species, but I would say if we have access to species that are coastal species that we can easily access and are able to even use something like citizen science data to be able to find out more about them, what an opportunity. If we can't do that in New Zealand, there's nowhere that we can. So.
Another question while we're with you, Krista, from Peter. What's the impact of deep sea trawling on Kaikoura canyons? Perhaps a factor for the decline of sperm whales?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. We have some amazing protection here in Kaikoura. So a few years back, a environmental group fought for protection in a marine reserve and a whale sanctuary. So we actually have a lot of protection against fishing. And what we don't understand well is what's the previous impacts. A lot of people will even question sperm whale abundance. Could it be something like whaling? We took out, a few hundred animals out of the population just within a couple of years. Can that population recover? And the same really comes from fishing. We have a squid fishery here that was booming back in the day, and it was basically fished out. And now we don't have a squid fishery here. And the main thing that the sperm whales feed on are that. Is this a delayed reaction to fisheries from the past that's actually now sort of surfacing with our, population decline? So yeah, as far as current fisheries, we really don't understand the impacts, but I'd go even further and say probably the previous fisheries impacts is even more important to look into, to actually link when did we get those population declines, and then how has that linked now to looking at population survival over time, and actually even doing things like viability analysis to be able to look at, are these populations viable because of that fishing industry that happened previously? So, yeah, but a good question.
So many good questions. Here's a final question for all of you, and we might just do the same order again if that's okay. Sadie, Sarah, Christy. So what are the next most pressing questions or areas to explore?
From my perspective, I think the next things we need to look at is the abyssal zone of the ocean. So the abyssal zone is the bit of the ocean that's 3,000 meters deep, because we know next to nothing. I think if you remember back to my presentation and I showed the map, we really don't know anything about that part of the ocean. It's really deep and it's hard to get to. And with I think there's a recent paper that I was involved in looking at brittle stars across the world, and it showed that actually the species that live in those very deepest parts of the oceans are actually very well connected to other parts of the ocean. So it's quite and more connected to each other than the species that are in shallow water. So I think that's kind of the next frontier. Whether it's the most pressing question, I don't know, but it's certainly one it's going to present like a very big challenge to us of how we're going to do that, because it's a really big area to understand. But it's one that, all of the species that I've been talking about, they're all part of the web of life. And if you're making an impact on these very deep creatures, there's certainly lots of impact with climate change. What might happen if the circulation of the ocean is affected with the melting of the ice and things like that through climate change impacts on the ocean. Seabed mining, deep sea fishing. There's a lot of impacts that are going on in the deepest parts of the ocean, and lots of questions that we need to ask before those impacts really take hold.
You want to thank you, Sarah.
Yeah, I agree with a lot with everything that Sadie was saying, and if I focus on the Antarctic seas, as we were seeing during my presentation, there's a lot of rapid change going on there, but there's a lot of areas that we haven't seen. There's a lot of interactions that we don't understand. We have data that is from near where we have research stations, and then each country sort of has a station that surrounds around the continent. But there's huge gaps that exist between our observations of what is happening. We have areas that we have historic vessels doing surveys at, but then even there we have huge gaps. Like even in the Ross Sea, one side has a lot of data, one side doesn't have a lot of data. So there's a lot of spatial coverage that is really important to get as climate change impacts in the area continue to intensify, particularly trying to understand the relationship of animals to sea ice, to glaciers, to fluxes that are coming off the continent and into the ocean, and to understand potential implications that may happen in 10 years, 20 years as things continue to change. And to understand that, I think having the ability to expand our spatial coverage and also the ability to expand our temporal surveys, so being able to look across time a bit better. We don't have very good coverage during winter months down there. There's not good information of what's happening in the marine environment during the winter months. And so the more that we can use technology to get data during those winter months and understand these seasonal cycles, the better we can understand how the environments are going to be shifting through ongoing climate change impacts in the area.
Yeah, really good answers. I agree with both of those. I think for marine mammals, something that is really important is to be able to not only look at, say, their habitat use and their movement patterns, but also mapping that with human threats. So we know a little bit about where our marine mammals are, but we don't know a lot about the threats in each of those areas. And what's probably even more important is actually understanding the cumulative impacts of those. So we don't know, for instance, thresholds, how much noise or how much plastic or how much, disturbance a species can tolerate before those populations decline, which means that even if we have populations we understand a little bit about and we are monitoring, we don't know when they could tip and actually become at a higher, threat classification. So yeah, we can do a really good job at doing individual assessments in individual areas and looking at individual populations and feel like we're doing science, so we're doing a good thing. But I don't think we're doing a good job at collaborating to connect the dots. And there are some really great things that are being done for some species, Hector's and Maui's dolphins, because they're our national kind of icon marine mammal that's only found in New Zealand. We do really good threat mapping to be able to look at all the maps in all the threats in lots of regions and find out how we can better combat against those threats. But that's just one species and all the rest don't really have anything like that. So yeah, better collaboration and better data to understand what the cumulative impacts are over their whole range, not just individual areas, I think is really going to change how we manage these species facing a lot of threats like human or climate change. So.
Great stuff. Thank you. I think one of the things that struck me about tonight is, our theme is the ocean is largely unexplored, and even though that's still true, so there's lots of work still for all the young people coming through to do. I've also been struck by the amazing things that we are learning, like the new knowledge that we're gaining everywhere you look. There's amazing new species, there's amazing new connections, and better understandings about our ecosystems. And so I'm filled with awe and amazement at you guys doing all of that work. So anyway, this is it. A huge thank you to tonight's speakers, Sadie, Sarah, and Christy. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and your wisdom. To you, our audience, thanks for being here with us and asking great questions as always. I'm very sorry if we ran out of time before we got to your question. Kia ora and many thanks to Laura from Seaweek, who's working away behind the scenes making this all happen. Laura says, can you please take a moment to fill out the survey which we've just posted in the chat? We will also be sending out a follow-up email. I just had to click something. And we'll include the link because we do like to hear what you think. If you missed our previous webinars, remember they're all online. You can find them on the Seaweek website. They're on the news tab there, as well as on Seaweek's YouTube channel. And this webinar will pop up in a day or two if you want to share it with anyone. Our next webinar is going to be the last webinar of the series, and it will take place on the 9th of October, so you've just got a little while to wait for that one. It's going to be aligned with the International Day of Climate Action, and we're looking at ocean literacy principle number 3, that the ocean is a major influencer on weather and climate. If you're in the Auckland area, our in-person events for the series are held at the Sir Peter Blake Marine Education and Recreation Centre in the Long Bay Okura Marine Reserve. Our next event will be during Conservation Week on the 7th of September, so that's just over a week away, on Principle 4, that the ocean makes Earth habitable. The event will include presentations as well as beach and water activities to take action for our ocean and learn about the ways the ocean sustains us and how we can support the ocean and ourselves into the future. Looking further ahead, Seaweek 2026 will be next March. There'll be events all across Aotearoa with the theme that will be principle number 6, that the ocean and humans are inextricably interconnected. So check the Seaweek website, follow social media, join the mailing list to find out more, and do get involved in events in your area. The final event of the series will align with the International Day for Biological Diversity, which is May next year, 2026, and that's going to highlight Principle 5, that the ocean supports a great diversity of life and ecosystems, and we've got a bit of a hint of that tonight. Now in closing, nō reira ngā mihi nui kia koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. A big thank you to all of you. Remember, toi moana, toi tangata. Healthy seas, healthy people. Thanks for your company. Ata Marie. Good night.